Hello friends, welcome back. Myself Pushpender Singh, and we are going to start with our daily current affairs. So today you have 24th of July 2021. You know that these lectures are useful for those who are preparing for the civil services examination, which is conducted by the UPSC, right? As you know that these lectures are basically covering the current affairs portion. You can subscribe our channel on the YouTube for these lectures, which are useful for your government competitive examinations. You can subscribe and you can supplement your preparation with the help of these lectures. Alright, so let's begin with the lecture. So the first news is all about Chandrasekhar Azad. Okay, so the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has paid the rich tribute to the great revolutionary Chandrasekhar Azad on his Jayanti. Right. So the Chandrasekhar Azad, everybody knows him. He was a great freedom fighter, great revolutionary, right? And the Chandrasekhar was basically a great Indian revolutionary who has reorganized the Hindustan Republican Association, right, under the new name that is known as Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, right. So if you see the background behind the renaming of Hindustan Republican Association to Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, so you could easily find out that the ideology of the Chandrasekhar Azad was liberalism. He followed the liberalism, socialism, right, as well as anarchism, right. So he was the liberal leader. So Hindustan Republican Association (HRA) was basically a revolutionary organization, right, that was established way back in 1924 by the Sachidanand Sanyal, okay, along with the Narendra Mohan Sen, along with the Patul Ganguly, right? And it was basically an offshoot of the Anushilan Samiti, that was also one of the revolutionary organization. The other members of the Hindustan Republican Association was, as you know, that the world famous Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, Sukhdev, Ramprasad Bismil, Roshan Singh, Ashfaqullah Khan, as well as the Rajendra Lahiri. All right, and the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, that was the renamed version of the Hindustan Republican Association, that was renamed in 1928. It was renamed at the Firoz Shah Kotla Stadium, right, in New Delhi, which have been recently named as the Arun Jaitley Stadium by the Chandrasekhar Azad, Ashfaqullah Khan, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Thapar, as well as the Jogesh Chandra Chatterjee. All right, if you could see, right, Chandrasekhar Azad was basically involved in a lot of revolutionary activities. For example, in 1921, right, or sorry, 1925, he was involved in the Kapuri train robbery, right, and also he was also involved in the shooting of J.P. Saunders at Lahore. That is the Saunders murder case to avenge the killing of the Lala Lajpat Rai. In December 1921, Mahatma Gandhi launched basically the non-cooperation movement, right? And the Azad or Chandrasekhar Azad basically took the active part specifically in that movement. Chandrasekhar Azad was ultimately arrested by the British when the Azad produced before the judge or the judicial magistrate. He gave his name Azad, right, which means the free, basically, and he attempted to blow up the Viceroy of India train in 1929 itself, right. So he tried to blow up that entire train also, and he used to fondly recite an Hindustani couplet, his only poetic composition, that is दुश्मन की गोलियों का हम सामना करेंगे, आजाद आजाद ही रहे हैं, आजाद ही रहेंगे. Okay, so he was Chandrasekhar Azad. That the famous slogan was given him, आजाद हूँ आज़ादी मरूंगा, दुश्मन की गोलियों का हम सामना करेंगे, आज़ादी हैं आज़ादी रहेंगे. That was the his found recite in Hindustani couplet, right, and it was his only poetic composition, right. ये चंद्रशेखर आजाद की केवल पोइटिक कंपोजिशन है, दुश्मन की गोलियों का हम सामना करेंगे, आज़ादी रहे आज़ादी रहेंगे. All right. Next, Lokmanya Tilak. As you know that, along with Chandrasekhar Azad, the Lokmanya Tilak was also a great freedom fighter. Okay, so Prime Minister Narendra Modi also paid the rich tribute to the great revolutionary leader Lokmanya Tilak on his Jayanti. So both Chandrasekhar Azad as well as Lokmanya Tilak, both of the great leaders have their Jayanti on 23rd of July. 23rd of July. Okay. So Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who is also known as Lokmanya Tilak, okay, was the Indian nationalist. He was also a teacher, a great teacher as well as the independent activist, and he was also considered the third of Lal Bahadur Shastri, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, as well as the Pal, right? So he was basically third of basically Lal, Bal, and Pal. Okay, and the Tilak was the first leader of the Indian independent movement. The British colonial authorities called him the father of Indian unrest. The father of Indian unrest. The British authorities called him or gave him this title. He was also conferred with the title of Lokmanya, right? Which means he was accepted by the people as their leader. So this title of the Lokmanya was given by the people in the due course of the time when he fought for their rights. Mahatma Gandhi also called him the maker of modern India. The maker of modern India, right? All right. Let us understand about the political ideology of great Lokmanya Tilak. So first of all, he advocated the Rashtriya or nationalism, right? He advocated Rashtriyata or Rashtriya or nationalism, right? And he joins the Indian National Congress in 1890, and he belongs to the extreme faction. If you see the Indian National Congress, you have the two types of faction: the extremists as well as the moderates. So he belongs to the extreme faction or the extremist faction, right, of the Indian National Congress, which ultimately led the independent movement. The Tilak was one of the first and the strongest advocate of the Swaraj. So he was the strong advocate of the Swaraj, which means the self-rule, right? As well as he was also supporter of the strong radical movement in specifically in the Indian consciousness. He was known for his cause, right? That was Swaraj my birthplace or birthright, and I shall have it, right? It was his basically his quote in the Marathi. Initially, it was written in the Marathi, right? And he was also the great educationalist. He was also the great teacher, and he was inspired by the Vishnu Sastri Chapter, and pursuant to him, he co-founded the New English School for the Secondary Education in 1880, right, with the few of his college friends, including the Gopal Ganesh Agarkar, Mahadev Balal, and the Vishnu Sastri Chapulkar, right. So he was involved in the co-foundation of this English school. Their goal was to improve the quality of education, specifically in the Indian youths. Right, the team have already set up. The team basically involvement of the Vishnu Sastri Chapolkar, the Lokmanya Tilak, then the Mahadev Balal, the Gopal Krishna Garkar, that consisting of a close team for the educational reform. The team would then set up the Deccan Educational Society, the Deccan Education Society, specifically in 1884. The main purpose of setting up of this Deccan Education Society to create a new system of education that taught the young Indian nationalists the ideas through the emphasis on the Indian culture, right? The society which was established, the Ferguson College, ultimately in 1885 for the post secondary studies, and the Tilak taught the mathematics at the Ferguson College, which was ultimately set up by this Deccan Education Society, right? So he has a great contribution to that education system also, right? And Lokmanya Tilak was also involved in the freedom movement, as you know that following the partition of the Bengal, specifically in 1905, right? That was set out by the Lord Curzon. The Bal Gangadhar Tilak basically propagated the Swadeshi movement in 1905, and that encouraged the people to boycott all the foreign goods or the British goods. Tilak basically reunited, right, with his the fellow nationalists, as well as he joined the Indian National Congress during the Lucknow Pact that was basically signed in 1960, and Tilak helped to found the All India Home Rule League, okay, All India Home Rule League in 1916 to 1980, along with the Annie Besant, right, along with the J.S. Khaperde. So he was involved in setting up this All India Home Rule League, specifically with the Annie Besant. The Tilak was also impressed by the Russian Revolution. So he expressed his admiration for the Vladimir Lenin. So he was a great admirer of the Vladimir Lenin also. And he started the Home Rule League specifically in Maharashtra, the central provinces, Karnataka, as well as Berar region. Right, the Besant League or the Annie Besant League was basically active in the rest part of India. So both Annie Besant as well as the Bal Gangadhar Tilak both have divided or demarcated the region. The Bal Gangadhar Tilak was basically concentrated in the Maharashtra, central provinces, Karnataka and Berar region. The Annie Besant was involved in rest of the country except these places. Right. Let us understand about religio-political views of the Bal Gangadhar Tilak. The Tilak sought to unite the Indian population for the mass political action, right, through anti-British and pro-Hindu activism. So he sought the justification in his original principle of the Ramayana and Bhagavad Gita, and he named this call to activism the Karma Yoga or the Yoga of the actions. And obviously, the events like Ganpati festival, Shivaji Jayanti, was basically used by the Tilak to build the national spirit. So he was also, try to build this mass political action through this pro-Hindu activism with the help of these festivals. And he was also writer of the great books like, Arctic Home in the Vedas, the Orion, the Indian Unrest, written by also the Valentine Kirol along with Bal Gangadhar Tilak. So the Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. That is a great quotation given by the Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Next, the National Farmers Welfare Program Implementation Committee. So here, the Union Agriculture and the Farmers Minister inaugurated the office of, right, the National Farmers Welfare Program Implementation Committee. Right. So this committee was set up by the Ministry of Agriculture for the purpose of the implementation of the welfare program specifically for the farmers. So this National Farmers Welfare Program Implementation Committee, right, would act as a project monitoring unit for the purpose of implementation of various programs, like first the Prime Minister Kisan Yojana, the Kisan Man Dhan Yojana, the Agricultural Infrastructure Fund, and other schemes of the Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. Now let us understand one by one, right, about these programs for which this committee, which is known as the National Farmers Welfare Program Implementation Committee, would act as a project monitoring unit. So first of all, let us understand about the PM Kisan. The PM Kisan, which is also known as the Prime Minister Kisan Samman Nidhi. It is nothing but a scheme. It is a scheme, right? So the PM Kisan was launched in the year of 2019, right? And the government is providing almost 6,000 rupees, right, in the 3 installment to around 14 crore farmers annually. So the idea is that to provide that amount directly transferred into the bank accounts of the beneficiary through the direct benefit transfer. Right? The scheme basically defines the family as a husband, wife, and the minor children. Okay. The fund is around 2,000 directly transferred to the bank account of the farmer's family. Next, the Kisan Mandhan Yojana. Okay. The Kisan Mandhan Yojana was basically launched by the government of India. The main purpose of this scheme is to provide the social security to the small and the marginal farmers at their old age specifically. Okay, so to provide the social security to the basically farmers at their old age, specifically the small and marginal farmers. Then this agricultural infrastructure fund. This agricultural infrastructure fund is a medium to long-term debt financing facility. So it is basically the medium and the long-term debt financing facility, right, for the investment in the viable projects for the post-harvest management infrastructure, right, as well as the community farming assets through the credit guarantee system. So here the duration of the scheme for the investment of this medium to long-term debt financing facility, right, is basically from the financial year 2020 to the financial year 2029. So that the period for the scheme is around 10 years. Under the scheme, a 1 lakh crore 1 lakh crore will be provided by the banks as well as the financial institutions as a loan, okay, with an interest subvention of around 3% per annum. Okay, and the credit guarantee coverage under basically the scheme for the loans, that will be up to the 2 crore for the maximum period of 7 years, right? This type of eligible beneficiaries under this agriculture infrastructure fund include the farmers producers organizations, the marketing cooperative societies, self-help groups, right? The agri entrepreneurs, the startups, and etc., right? So it is the most important aspect that the committee was basically setting up of for this overall supervision of these schemes. Okay. Next, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So initially, US was skeptical of the development of Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which was basically initially planned between Russia and the Germany. Right. This Nord Stream 2 pipeline would be used specifically to transport, you know, the gas, right? So here the gas will be transported between the Russia and the Germany. Initially, the US has objections and imposed the sanctions to prevent the completion of the major gas pipeline between the Russia and the Germany. But now, the US has signaled for the approval of this project as to lift up the sanctions which were previously imposed by the US. So this project in the year of 2015, the Russian energy major Gazprom, as well as the 5 other European firms, have decided to build this Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline will be around 1,200 kilometers long, and that will run from the Ust-Lova in the Russia, right, to the Greifswald in the Germany through the Baltic Sea. That means some of the portion of this, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, would basically run across the Baltic Sea, and it will definitely carry around 55 billion cubic meters of the gas per year. So it is of great economic interest not only for the Russia but also for the European nations like Germany. So here you could see, right, the gas pipelines that would basically start. So here the Nord Stream initial pipelines that would start nearby the St. Petersburg, and that would pass through the Baltic Sea, ultimately reach to the Germany, right? That is the second one, that is a Nord Stream 2 pipeline that is currently under construction. Some of the portion have already been constructed, right? And there are other pipelines that may arise over the period of time. Okay. Next, behind the polluted India river stretches, inadequate sewage treatment is the only reason. So this study was basically published in a journal. Okay. Now this has been published specifically in the journals, and it has been found that the Indian rivers and the streams, specifically in the 31 states and the Union Territory, do not meet the water quality criteria. And the main purpose of the pollution in the streams or pollution on these rivers is basically because of the inadequate sewage treatment facility. So here the Central Pollution Control Board in the year of 2008 identified 351 polluted river stretches in our country. Okay, the assessment of this water quality for the identification of the polluted river stretch found in almost 31 states, okay, as well as the Union Territory, that the rivers did not meet the required water criteria. And these states and the union territories will have to submit their action plans, right, for the treatment of this water, specifically in this polluted stretch. Okay, let us understand about the key findings of the report. So the Maharashtra has the highest number of the polluted rivers as per this report, right? So Maharashtra has highest number of polluted river, that is around 53, which is followed by Assam, that is around 44, followed by Madhya Pradesh, that is around 22, followed by Kerala around 21, followed by Gujarat around 20, followed by Odisha around 19, and followed by West Bengal and Karnataka, each 17. Right, the stretch of the rivers not meeting with the criteria is identified as a polluted stretch. Okay, so highest number of polluted stretch are basically found in the Maharashtra. So that polluted stretch where the rivers do not meet with the criteria, and there are basically categorized into 5 priorities. The stretches or 5 priorities categories, which is based on some sort of a biological oxygen demand. And almost 60% of the polluted river stretches exist in 8 states, that is Maharashtra, Assam, Madhya Pradesh, Kerala, Gujarat, Odisha, West Bengal, and Karnataka. Okay, so as I told you that these polluted river stretches are prioritized into 5 categories based on the biological oxygen demand. What is biological oxygen demand? That is the oxygen which is being demanded, right, by the aquatic species or by the aquatic ecosystem, right, for the sustenance. So if the biological oxygen demand is greater, That means, right, there is lot of degradation activities is going on, right? So the biological oxygen demand is whenever there is high, that means lot of activities or lot of aeration type of activities been going on over there. So the priority one areas is if the biological oxygen demand is greater than 30 milligrams per liter, that will be the highest priority area. Second priority stretches will be where the biological oxygen demand is between 20 to 30 milligrams per liter. The third priority area is wherever the BOD or biological oxygen demand is around 10 to 20 milligrams per liter. The fourth is where the biological oxygen demand is around 6 to 10 milligrams per liter. And the fifth is where biological oxygen demand is around 3 to 6 milligrams per liter. So definitely the local bodies in the department concern of the states will be liable to pay the compensation of around 5 lakhs a month per drain if the order is not implemented on the time as per the Central Pollution Control Board, right? And the National Green Tribunal also directed that 100% of the treatment of the sewage, 100% treatment of the sewage is basically needed to be ensured, and at least to that extent in situ remediation that has to be done specifically for the setting up of this sewage treatment plant and connecting all the drains to these sewage treatment plants. Okay, now let us understand about the key water quality indicators. So first of all, dissolved oxygen. Dissolved oxygen I've already gave you. The dissolved oxygen basically measures the amount of oxygen dissolved in the water. So the oxygen is essential, as you know, for all of the aquatic plants, aquatic animals, but high levels in the water can be harmful to the fish as well as other aquatic organisms. Next is water temperature. As you know that aquatic organisms are dependent on certain temperature range for their optimal health. If the temperature increases beyond that optimum range or decreases to that below that optimum range, then what will happen? This temperature affect many other parameters in the water, including the dissolved oxygen, the type of plant, type of animals, the type of organism, parasites, pollution, and diseases. Next, pH. Right, as you know that the pH measures the alkalinity as well as the acidity of the water. So a pH of around 7 is basically called neutral, as you know, and if the pH is below 7, you can call the water is basically acidic. If the pH is above 7, you can call it as basic or alkaline. You can call it as a basic or alkaline. So acid rain from auto exhaust or other pollutant causes the drop in the pH specifically in the water level. Next, Escherichia coli, or that is called E. coli. The coli is basically a fecal, coliform. It is a fecal coliform bacteria. It is a bacteria that comes from the human and animal based. Okay, the Environmental Protection Agency uses this Escherichia coli or E. coli measurements to determine whether fresh water is a safe of the recreation or not. So here the disease causing bacteria, viruses, protozoans may be present in the water, and that has basically elevated the levels of E. coli. So level of E. coli can basically increase during the flooding, right? And the E. coli is measured in terms of the number of colony forming units specifically in the water. Next is the specific conductance. Here the specific conductance test measures the ability of the water to pass an electric current, right, in that respect. And then nitrates. Nitrogen is basically the nutrient which is necessary for the growth of all living organisms, right? Here, if there is excess nitrates is present in the water, that may lead to the algal growth. The algal can basically rob the water from the dissolved oxygen. Ultimately, that can cause the depletion of all the dissolved oxygen. That will ultimately kill the fishes as well as other aquatic and creatures in the environment. Next, microplastic pollution. So recently, an analysis which was done, right, in the stretches of the river Ganga by the Delhi-based environment NGO Toxic Link have revealed that the pollution specifically in the stretches of the river Ganga is because of the microplastics. So this study, which is named as the quantitative analysis of the microplastic along the river Ganga, was based on the analysis of the water samples that was basically collected at the Haridwar, Kanpur and Varanasi at the three prime spots where the Ganga river used to flow. Okay, the Ganga basically flows through, as you know that, through 5 states, right? And it has been at the center of the massive multi-crore undertaking that was taken by the center in the form of the National Mission for the Clean Ganga. to get rid of any sort of a contamination, specifically in the river Ganga stretches. So untreated water, untreated sewage, industrial waste, religious offering, wrapped in the plastic or non-degradable plastic piles, pollutants specifically in the river, right? And this plastic products and the waste materials released as well as dumped into the river breaks down, and eventually these broken down materials turn into various microparticles. These microparticles remains in the food chain, right? And because of that, there will be lot of ill effects are there, right? Now these microplastics are basically the plastic debris which are smaller than 5 millimeter in the length, and that is around the size of the sesame seed. So you can say that the microplastics are defined as the synthetic solid particles, okay, that is size basically ranging from 1 micrometer to around 5 millimeter. So that size is 1 micrometer to around 5 millimeter, micrometer 5 millimeter, okay, which is also insoluble in the water, because since they are synthetic, so they are basically insoluble in the water, and they are recognized as the major source of the marine pollution, specifically in the water bodies, all right. Now they came from the varieties of the sources. For example, one of them may be larger pieces of the plastic that degrade into smaller pieces that are difficult to detect, because can you see just 1 micrometer with the bare eye? You cannot simply see, okay, and that is what they are affecting almost every organism in the food chain. Now let us understand some more aspect related to the microplastic. So why this microplastic pollution is specifically harmful? So as you know that durability of the plastic, which implies that the plastic can take hundreds to the thousands of the year to completely degrade or to completely decompose, right? As well as these plastic may turn into the smaller sediments, and because of that they may remains in the basically in the environment for the thousands of the year together, right, wherever they dump, okay. So in the oceans, the plastic pollutions impact the marine life, the ocean health, the coastal tourism, as well as the human health also. Over the past few years, right, various reports from various scientific organizations have proved that these marine animals, right, such as whales, seabirds, even turtles, unknowingly ingest these plastics, as well as often suffocate to death. For humans too, these marine pollution is harmful, that it reaches to the food chain, right, for the humans. And for instances, these microplastics that we are talking, they are found in the tap water, they are found in beer, and they are found in even the salt also. And a lot of study have been done in that one. An average person eats an at least 50,000 particles of the microplastic every year. That is basically recently the study which was published, and it says that on an average a person ingest around 50,000 particles of the microplastic, that is the size of around 1 micrometer to 5 millimeter per year, right? Let us understand what are the measures which are taken by the government. So India has pledged to ban all single use plastics by the year of 2020. So all offices, as you have seen that, of the central government as well as the state governments, major PSUs, have been told to prohibit these single use plastics, okay. And India has banned already the import of the solid plastic waste, and India has passed the plastic waste management rules, right? These plastic waste management rules was passed by the India in 2016, and that has basically introduced the extended producers responsibility. The most important aspect is the 3 R's plus E strategy. What is 3 R? The 1 R basically related to the reduce. So here, to efficiently reduce the plastic pollution, there is evident need to reduce the uses of the plastic. The another R is basically the reuse. What is that? Many plastic items can be reused or used for the different purposes, right? So before throwing these plastic items, it is important to consider how they can be reused or they can be reanalyzed back. The third is basically recycle. So plastic recycling consists of the collecting of the plastic waste from different places and then reprocess it to the new products to reduce the amount of the plastics in the water stream. And what is that E? E means basically educate. So 3 R's plus E strategy, that is educate. That is another crucial solution is the education in order to increase the awareness of the behavioral change among the people, and that is what is something which is most important. All right. So next, the Mekong Ganga Corporation. So here our Honorable External Affairs Minister Shri S. Jaishankar have addressed the 11th Mekong Ganga Corporation meeting. Okay, that was basically held on the on the context of the Mekong Ganga Corporation. This Mekong Ganga Corporation consisting of the six countries: India, Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. Right. Our External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar have emphasized on the collective and the collaborative response, specifically to effectively deal with the coronavirus pandemic, and says that the virus does not respect the nation boundaries and we should be more coordinative, right? And we need basically the collaborative and collective approach in order to prevent the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. Let us understand about the Mekong Ganga Corporation. The Mekong Ganga Corporation basically consisting of the six countries that I have told you: India, Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. This Mekong Ganga Corporation was launched in the year of 2000. The main purpose is to boost the cooperation in the range of the areas, including the connectivity, tourism, and the culture, specifically in the Mekong Ganga basin. For India, the Mekong region, right? For specifically for India, the Mekong region is of greater importance, right? The India seeks multi-dimensional engagement with the Mekong countries. The India basically aimed to promote the connectivity in this region in the broadest sense, in terms of not just the physical connectivity but also the digital connectivity, but also the economic connectivity, the people to people connectivity, right, with the government of India is planning to have. So this Mekong Ganga cooperation stand on the strong foundation of the shared geographical, historical, and civilizational ties among the six countries including India, and it is of greater importance not only for the India but also the other country may also get benefited from the India. Next, the South China Initiative. What is China South Asia Initiative? What is that? Right? India can join the China-led South Asian Initiative. What is that? Right? That has been recently been said by the Bangladeshi Foreign Minister that for the COVID-19 vaccines and the poverty alleviation, right? If the India so desired, they can join the China-led the South Asian Initiative that is known as the China South Asia Initiative. Now, what is this China South Asia Initiative? It is basically the China-led initiative that leads to the creation of the China South Asian countries emergency supply reserve, right? As well as it has also the aspects related to the poverty alleviation and the cooperative development center. So this China South Asian countries poverty alleviation and and this cooperative development center was launched in China. That was launched in China. That bears the India and the ambassadors of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh was basically invited to China. Right. This center, which is known as the South China, the China South Asian countries emergency. Sorry, the center which is known as the Poverty and Alleviation Cooperative Development Center, that basically aims to pool the strength, integrate resources, exchange the wisdom to support and help the South Asian countries economic development as well as the livelihood improvement, that is jointly promoting the cause of the poverty alleviation in the South Asian countries. So it is basically minus India initiative. It is basically minus India initiative. Why it is called the minus India initiative? Because at the time of this launching of this center, at the time of this launching of the center in the China, right? The China invited all ambassadors of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, but not India, right? So that is what it is also known as the minus India initiative of China, right? And China was basically excluded the Bhutan and the Maldives also in that China South China initiative. So what is the India's position? So India is unlikely to consider the grouping's involvement with China. Definitely that could be seen to dilute its role specifically in the South Asian region, or specifically in the SAARC region, right? Some of the experts basically suggest the India's role in the SAARC region, that minus India initiative may be initially sorry, may be harmful for initially for India, but over the period of time it may be useful for India. And India is the only country of these 8 SAARC nations that has not been requested or accepted this Chinese COVID vaccines that was also promoted by the government of China. Okay. Next, periodic labor force survey 2019 and 20. So here the periodic labor force survey was basically given, okay, as that report was basically also given specifically, you know, with respect to the National Statistics Office. The National Statistics Office basically provided this periodic survey specifically with respect to the labor force data. So it is a very important survey which was provided by the National Statistical Office. Sorry. Yeah. So what is the periodic labor force survey? So let us understand first of all the periodic labor force survey. It is an important survey, okay, that has been done by the National Statistics Office. Okay, the main purpose is to ascertain the availability of the labor force data, right, with the Indian context, so that any sort of information which is lagging with the government of India, right, can be fulfilled. So the objective of the periodic labor force survey is to estimate the key employment and unemployment indicators, that is the worker population ratio, the labor force participation rate, the unemployment rate. So the main purpose of this periodic labor force survey is to estimate the key findings as well as the unemployment indicators related to the workers population ratio, labor force participation rate, unemployment rate, right, in the short interval of around 3 months for the urban area, specifically in the current weekly status. The second main objective of the periodic labor force survey is to estimate the employment and unemployment indicators in both in the usual status as well as in both the rural and urban areas annually. Okay. Now let us understand the various dimensions of the survey. The first is labor force participation rate. What is that? It has been defined as a percentage of the persons in the labor force. So that is the working or seeking or available for the work specifically in the population. The second is workers population ratio. What is that? It is being defined as a percentage of employment or percentage of employed among the persons in the labor force. Sorry, what is the workers population ratio? That is a percentage of the employed persons specifically in the population. What is unemployment ratio? It is being defined as the percentage of the persons who are unemployed among the persons in the labor force. What is activity status, usual status? That is the activity status of a person is determined on the basis of the activities that has been pursued by the person, right, during a specified reference period. So when the activity status is determined on the basis of the reference period of the right of the last 365 days, right, it is known as the activity or usual activity status of that particular person. The last is basically activity status, current weekly status. What is that? The activity status determined on the basis of the reference period of the last 7 days. That is what it is known as the current weekly status, right? That the date of the survey, which is also known as the CWS or current weekly status of a particular person. Now let us understand the highlights of this report, right? The labor force participation rate have been increased to 40.1% in the 2019 and 20 financial year. It was basically into 37.5 in the last year, and last year it was 36.9%. The workers population rate was also improved, right, to around 38.2% in 2019-20. It was basically around 35.3% in 2018-19, and it was 34.7% in 2017 and 18. The unemployment rate basically fell to around 4.6% in 2019-20. It was around 5.8% in 2018-19, as well as it was much higher, around 6.1% in 2017 and 18. Next, you have the gross environmental product. So here, the most important aspect is that the Uttarakhand government recently announced that it will initiate the valuation of its natural resources in the form of the gross environmental product, right? It is basically on the lines of the gross domestic product. So what is that gross environmental product? So why first of all that need? The idea of valuation of that component of the environment is not a new concept. First of all, it has already been introduced in some of the Western countries, but it got impetus following the rapid degradation of our ecosystem, which has led to the adverse impact of the ecosystem services that we get from the ecosystems. So now let us understand what is this gross environmental product. The gross environmental product basically measures the ecosystem services of a particular area, right? So you can say that it reflects the aggregated annual value of the goods and the services which have been provided by the ecosystem, like forests, the water bodies, the oceans, right, to the people specifically in the given region, right, at the district level, at the state level, at the country level. So you can say that it entails the establishment of the natural capital accounting framework. So that is the development of the natural capital accounting framework, right? That is by integrating the ecological benefits to the common measure, or benefits into the common measure of the economic growth, right? And it summarizes the value of ecosystem services in the single monetary metric. Now, what has been advantage of which has been offered by this global environmental product? So it has been applied as a scientific basis of the eco compensation and public financial transfers. For example, the Finance Commission, right, the revenue sharing formula between union and the states includes the forest cover as a determining factor in the state share, right? So this global environment, so green environmental product, right, is can be applied to the measure of the status of the ecosystem services, which is an important indicator of the sustainable development, and it is also the crucial indicator for measuring the progress of the eco civilization. So its implementation definitely can help to assess the impact of the anthropological pressure on our ecosystem, as well as the natural resources like the air resources, water resources, soil resources, and forest resources. For example, you can take an example of the Himalaya. You can take the example of the Himalaya. Himalaya contributes substantially to the sustainability of the Gangetic Plains, where around 500 million people live. So, Union government basically incorporated the value of the ecosystem services that has been provided of its stats in the national accounting. So according to the recommendation of the 12th and 13th Finance Commission, the grants that will transfer to the forest rich countries in amount to corresponding to their forest cover, right? So that is something that is that we have introduced this accounting tool in our system. Okay. Next, the secrecy of the vote must be in the election. So here, Supreme Court have given the recent verdict with respect to the secrecy. So Supreme Court basically held that for any election, it is to be whether it is a parliament or the state legislature, the maintenance of the secrecy for the voting is a must. What is a secret vote? For example, if the person goes for the voting purpose, right? A secret vote or the secret ballot is a voting method in which voter choice in the election or the referendum are anonymous, right? He should not be forced or compelled to inform or to disclose his voting pattern. So, what is the Supreme Court rule? That the secrecy is a part of the fundamental right of a person in terms of the freedom of speech and the expression. The confidentiality of the choice strengthens the democratic and the democratic base in our country, and the voter's discretion is definitely been allowed in order to ascertain its right to have this confidentiality, right, wherever he want to or he would like to vote. And the voter can also be voluntarily waive the privilege of this non-disclosure of this information, specifically with respect to the elections. Okay. Next, India improves the ranking in the trade facilitation. So that is the most important news which have been recently been fleshed out. So what is that? What is that? The India has basically scored around 90.32 percentage in the United Nations Economic and the Social Commission for Asia Pacific, right? Which is a basically global survey on the digital and sustainable trade facilitation, right? So India has significantly improved its ranking in terms of the trade facilitation due to the various reforms that has been undertaken specifically by the Central Board of Indirect Taxes. The survey which was conducted, right, by the United Nations Economic Social Commission for the Asia Pacific is a remarkable survey which basically hails the remarkable jump that India has taken from just 78.49 percentage in 2019 to around 90.32 percentage in that survey. So this global survey on the digital and sustainable trade facilitation is conducted every 2 years or biennially by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific. In 2021 survey, right, include the assessment of 58 trade facilitation measures that has been covered by the WTO trade facilitation agreement. Okay, so after evaluation of this 143 countries, by the United Nations Economic Social Commission for the Asia Pacific, right? The 2021 survey has highlighted the India's significant improvement in its score in overall 5 key indicators. So 5 key indicators was basically importantly emphasized during that one. So India has performed well in all 5 indicators in that respect, and India has achieved 100% score in terms of the transparency index, in terms of the 60% score in terms of the women in the trade component, for example, in terms of transparency, right? The India has improved to 100% in 2021, right? It was just 93.33 percentage in 2019, right? And it has risen to around 100%, right? In terms of the institutional arrangement and cooperation, India has jumped to around 88.89 percentage in 2021. It was just 66.67 percentage in 2019. So it is a huge jump. Okay. Other party parameters like paperless trade improved to around 96.3 percentage in 2021. That is related to the paperless trade. So India has basically contributed a huge. It was around just 81.48 percentage in 2019, right? So that is the huge jump in terms of the India's performance, right? And the survey basically notes that the India is the best performing country when compared to the South and the Southwest Asia. The Southwest Asia basically region have almost the score of around 63.12 percentage. The Asia Pacific region having the score of around 65.85 percentage. So among the Southwest Asia region and among the Asia Pacific region, the India has performed well, specifically in that region. The overall score of India has also been found greater than many of these, OECD countries, like you have like the France, UK, Canada, Norway, Finland, and etc. Right. So India's overall score is greater than the average score of the European Union for that purpose, and India has achieved 100% score in terms of the transparency index. That is of huge importance in that one. Right. The main contributor to that reform is Central Board of Indirect Taxes and the Customs. Right. That has basically reformed, right, the system or the series of the reforms which was basically implemented by this the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and the Customs. All right. Next, the G20 agrees statement on the environment. So it is the first time the environment and the energy ministers that was meet on the group of the 20 rich nations were meeting a little progress on how to reach on the climatic goals. Right? The cluster of the countries basically resisting any firm commitment, specifically coming out from this group of 20 countries. So group of 20 countries meeting was basically held in Naples, right? They basically discussed the biodiversity and the natural environment, Naples, Italy. So that G20 group of ministers basically meet, environmental energy ministers meet from the sidelines of the climatic goals that has to be ascertained to take the firm commitment related to the biodiversity and natural environment. So this G20 meeting is seen as a key intermediate stage ahead of the global climatic talks that is going to be held in the Glasgow in the month of November this year, that is also known as COP26. So this year Italy, who hold the rotating G20 presidency. So Italy is basically having the rotating chair this year, right? Said the environment, has finally been agreed to the great joy, specifically on the weeks of the negotiation, right? G20 meeting basically is seen as a great meeting, specifically, right, just before the COP26 that is going to be held in the Glasgow in the month of November. So the urgency of the climate action have been brought, right, specifically in the context of the G20, right, specifically when the deadly floods basically occurred in the Europe, the fires basically occurred in the United States of America, right, and there is also the temperature which has risen in the Siberia, right, but the country, some of the countries are resisting any move, right, to reduce the global warming, specifically with that context. The developed countries agreed at the United Nations in 2009 together to contribute around 100 billion US dollars every year by 2020, specifically to finance the climate related actions or the climate related steps in the poorer countries. many of these countries are grappling with the rising seas, the storms, the droughts, right, which is occurring because of the climate change, right? But the target has yet to be met. So the G20 leaders have failed to meet, or failed to discuss, or failed to come to the consensus related to the target development. Next, first regional report on the drawing prevention. So here, the World Health Organization on 23rd July 2021 have launched the first regional status report on the drawing prevention in the Southeast Asia and the West Pacific region. So these two WHO reports, that is regional status reporting on the drowning in the West Pacific, the regional status reporting on the drowning in the Southeast Asia, right? It has been reported that nearly two-thirds of the global drowning deaths occurred in the Asia Pacific region itself. Okay, now it has also been said that the drowning is basically accounting for around 75% of the all deaths in the flood disaster, right? Specifically where the many countries in the Southeast Asia and the West Pacific regions are particularly vulnerable to that type of drowning. And as it says that the drowning is basically, is also the nearly two-thirds of the global drowning deaths basically occurred because of in the specifically in the Asia Pacific region, specifically in the Asia Pacific region. And it is also said in terms of the low and middle income countries, it says that the low and middle income countries account for more than 90% of their unintentional drawing deaths, right? And over the half of the world drawing, okay, occurs in the Southeast Asia and the West Pacific region. So almost 50% or more than 50% of the drawing deaths occur in the Southeast Asia as well as the Western Pacific regions. And the drowning is the third leading cause of the unintentional injury death that is basically causing across the world. So it has been estimated that in 48 of the 85 countries that has been related to the data, or that has been given the data related to the drowning, right? So drowning is basically one of the top 5 causes of the deaths, right, for the children under the age of 15 years in some countries. And it is the first time ever the reports basically provide the knowledge on the status of the drowning prevention and the water safety in this region. And that which basically also gives a snapshot of the scale of the problems, efforts which has to be taken, and the actions which has to be undertaken in terms of the preventable causes of the mortality and morbidity in those regions. So definitely both of these regions, the communities and the individuals interact with the water on the daily basis when the swimming at the beaches or the pools, or the traveling along the long distances over the water bodies in the boats, right, when using the rivers, ponds for collecting water, the sustainable livelihood when facing the exposure to the flood waters which is caused by the seasonal weather events, etc., because of the monsoons. So there are a lot of risk, right, in that one. And to reduce the risk definitely related to this hazard, the policy makers can basically have a lot of evidence based and low cost interventions which is being required as per the report. Okay, next you have the Akamai suffer outage. So what is that? The global internet infrastructure company which is known as Akamai suffered an outage specifically for an hour that basically takes down the several online applications including the Zomato across the India and the overseas for a while. Okay, this was the second major outage. This was the second major outage that was involved in the delivery networks in many months that affected internet uses on the global scale. What is that Akamai? The Akamai is basically global content delivery network, that is basically a cloud service platform that is rented by the online content and the commercial service apps, right? So basically the Akamai faced all of a sudden the disruption on its edge DNS servers, right, with that respect. And that has basically took down the platforms like Zomato, right, the Paytm, the parts of Amazon, right, Airbnb, the Steam, Disney plus Hotstar, okay, for a while. So these apps started dysfunctioning after that, and it was basically disruption on his HDNS service. What is this HDNS service? The HDNS is basically a technology. It is a technology that provides the shorter route for this DNS, or the domain name service. What is that? DNS means domain name service. Okay, so that HDSS provide the shorter route for this domain name service between the company server as well as its users, so thereby drastically decreasing the resolution times and providing the low latencies specifically for the purpose of these services. And in the month of specifically in the month of June, the major issues were basically related to the content delivery network of the cloud computing services, providing the fast services specifically, right, with that respect. And these cloud computing services providers offers the CDN, edge computing, and the cloud storage services to that particular the Zomato, Paytm, or any sort of a business conglomerates. All right. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. We'll meet again tomorrow for next current affairs. Thank you.